morning. It is September 17th, 2018. This is Ryan from Disruptarian Radio, disruptarian.com. And I wanted to give a little bit of perspective here on our new wave of socialists. They call themselves democratic socialists, but it's the same thing. It's all based on Marxism. It's all based on, group justice rather than just justice. It's based on, you know, equality in outcome rather than equality of opportunity. It's punish the rich and benefit the poor, and all this. This is you know starting from Marx all the way till Bernie Sanders. And then I wanted to show where the progressive movement came from in the United States, because the millennials these days are kind of on this progressive kick, and they're always talking about how the Republicans are racist and the Democrats are into social justice, and that's the reason, and blah blah blah, that's why they support the Democrats. And then when you point out that the Democrats were the party of slavery, the party of Jim Crow laws, the party of all kinds of oppression, they're the ones that fought against women's suffrage when the Republicans were championing the women's suffrage movement. And they say, well, during the civil rights movement and during the 60s, the platform switched. First it was, that the Republicans were the progressives, and then the Democrats switched over, and then they became the progressives. And so let's just point out where the progressive movement came from. It has always been a Democrat thing, and Democrats have always been racist. So the first progressive president we know of that was, championed as the progressive president, and his memory is coined as such. You look it up and you just find out, you from Google or whatever source, you look up the first progressive president of the United States, and it's Woodrow Wilson. Now, I'm going to go into some of his social policies. You can look them up separately, and I'll put links in the description so you can see them. But you can see, he was a champion for labor unions, for social nets, for retirement, like government-funded things, not privately funded, but government-funded things. And all of the things that the Democrats today are championing for, education, government-funded education, he championed that as well. But he also was a supporter of the KKK. He played in the White House The Birth of a Nation, which was a KKK film. You can see the idiots and their masks and the robes and all that in the movie, and it's a pro-KKK movie that Woodrow Wilson showed while he was president in the White House. Bona fide racist, absolutely, and the first progressive president in the United States. Now, we can go back and forth on this, and I would love to have a radio show on this maybe in February. I start my first radio show from Disruptarian. My first radio show will be February 2nd, 2019 at 4:20 p.m. Hawaii time, -10 GMT. And, I don't think I'll be talking about Woodrow Wilson or any of that then. The midterms will long be over and all that. And I've got a couple of issues that I want to talk about regarding Hawaii and conquest and all that stuff. We always hear about, how Europeans conquered all these places. Well, let's, in this broadcast coming up on February 2nd, let's explore the conquest of Hawaiians. They didn't come from here. They came from Southeast Asia and Tahiti. They've only been here for less than 1,000 years in Hawaii. So, did they conquer each other? Did they fight? Did they have wars? Was there brutal battles, genocide, things like? Yes, there was. And I'm going to talk about that on February 2nd. But let's talk about this with this whole thing of the parties switching. So, as I stated, the Republicans ended slavery. The Republicans championed women's suffrage. The Republicans, they've been very civil rights oriented. And then if you look at the 1964 civil rights movement, way more Republicans voted for that than Democrats. Democrats didn't want that, and they still don't. But now, because it's easier to get votes by appeasing minorities or pretending to, they now have that minority vote in a lot of cases, except for Trump showed up and then that changed a bit. So it's not as clear as people, clear and easy to figure out as people would think, but looking into Woodrow Wilson's history, you'll find out that what happened in 1913 and what happened during his presidency still reflects in the modern day progressives now. So the modern day progressives have always blocked, in the last 2 years, they've tried to block Federal Reserve audits. The Federal Reserve is just a private banking cartel that runs our currency and runs our treasury without any checks and balances. And they don't even want us to be able to audit them. They blocked that. Well, who was it that formed the Federal Reserve? That was Woodrow Wilson. He championed that. He, politicized that and brought that into his presidency, and they passed it in Congress during his presidency. So it was Woodrow Wilson that created the Federal Reserve, and it's modern day Democrats that are protecting the Federal Reserve. Every single one of them, except for I think two in the last time, voted against auditing the Federal Reserve. Where Republicans want to end it. And this is just modern day slavery. When you owe another person 30% of your wages, or you get punished, or 50% or whatever it is, whatever percentage, your labor should be yours. That's a God-given thing. That's not something that the state gave you. That's not something that the president gave you or Congress gave you. Your ability to work and do labor is yours. They shouldn't own any of that, not 5%, not even 1% of that. The government should not own it. And before 1913, they didn't. So in 1913, the progressives, the Democrats, decided, okay, well, we got rid of, the Republicans got rid of slavery. So we need to figure out a way to reinstitute that. So they created the Income Tax Act. And we went from being a very prosperous nation with very little debt, almost nothing, to being $20 trillion in debt, and we had this huge income tax. So how can they tax huge amounts of trillions and trillions of dollars and be in debt trillions and trillions of dollars when we had no income tax? There was none of that crap. The income tax is not necessary. It just gives them, more power to spend more money, and then when they spend it unwisely like they do, we go into debt. So they need to be reduced of that power. They need to be limited in that power, not expanded. And the Democrats and the progressives always want to expand the government and always want to expand the power of the state rather than limit it. And that has created the new slavery that we're in today in the United States. That whole taxation without representation. Well, when my tax money is going to things like they spend $500 million on Planned Parenthood to kill babies. Well, that's something that I don't approve of. They're taxing me, and they're not representing who I am or what I believe or where I want my money to go. That's taxation without representation. That's why we had the Revolutionary War, 1776, that is. So I don't think that anything has really changed, other than they're conning minorities into believing that they're helping them. When in all of these years that they've been president, like look at Obama's presidency, the black unemployment went up during Obama's presidency. The wealth gap between whites and blacks increased, and blacks are now poorer and less represented in the workforce, even under 8 years of a black president, a Democrat. And look at the wealth gap between the rich and the poor. It grew at like 4.5%, almost 5%, whereas in previous presidencies, even under Bush, it only grew 2 or 3%. So it's crazy to think that the Democrats are helping the poor, helping minorities, or for civil rights. They want to restrict speech now. They're going after people's free speech. They're going after people's guns. They're not into civil rights. These are guaranteed civil rights that we have in our Constitution, and they're going after them. So I'm going to go into this a little bit more with Dinesh D'Souza, but I just wanted to kind of show you some of the aspects of how the progressives of today are almost exactly like the progressives of yesteryear. So when they say that the political parties changed and now the progressives are the Democrats and they used to be the Republicans and vice versa, all this stuff, is just total horse crap. And I'm going to prove it here with these videos. So I'm going to display a collection of these videos. I hope you enjoy them, and I'll put the links in the descriptions to the originals. This is all used via the Fair Use Act. This is for education purposes only. Peace.
Voices and warning from the past.
Woodrow Wilson signed the Federal Reserve Act, which created the Fed. He later said, "I am a most unhappy man. I have unwittingly ruined my country. A great industrial nation is controlled by its system of credit. Our system of credit is concentrated. The growth of the nation, therefore, and all our activities are in the hands of a few men. We have come to be one of the worst ruled, one of the most completely controlled and dominated governments in the civilized world, no longer a government by free opinion, no longer a government by conviction and the vote of the majority, but a government by the opinion and duress of a small group of dominant men. Woodrow Wilson.
I want to pick up on something Cenk said earlier because it explains my answer. He said earlier that we want an America that doesn't hide from America's dark history. He goes, America has done terrible things to Native Americans, to blacks, slavery, segregation, and so on, and we don't want to conceal this history. I want to invite you to go see the movie next month. Here's why. It actually makes a startling argument. It argues that all these terrible things were in fact done in America, but they were not done by America. If America collectively did all this, it would never have stopped. So obviously some Americans did it, and other Americans stopped them. Hold on, let me finish. Now, the truth of the matter is that the Democratic Party in this country, historically, is the party of slavery, the invention of the positive good school of slavery that purported to show that slavery was good not just for the master, but also for the slave. At the end of slavery, the Democratic Party invented segregation and Jim Crow. It was a Democrat and a delegate to the Democratic Convention who founded the Ku Klux Klan in Tennessee. And for 50 years, the Ku Klux Klan was the domestic terrorist arm of the Democratic Party. The Democratic Party also went into eugenics and forced sterilization. In the 1930s, a young JFK went to Nazi Germany. He wrote about Hitler in very positive terms, saying this guy has been misunderstood, people are jealous of him. FDR in the 30s sent people to Italy to study fascism, to recommend ideas to improve the New Deal. Not only did FDR admire Mussolini, Mussolini reviewed FDR's book in an Italian magazine, goes, this guy's one of us, he's a fascist. Now, you don't know a lot of this, which is why you're listening with a kind of bewildered silence. But the reason you don't know it, is that you, many of us, me too, we are the victims of a progressive whitewash. And the progressive whitewash, let me finish my sentence. The progressive whitewash is to take all the horrible things that were done and say, America did this, and America did that, or the South did this, or the South did that. No, America didn't do it, you did. So the Democratic Party, having poisoned the wells, is now pretending to show up as the water commissioner.
So let me just quickly ask. This is interesting.
No, I got to answer. Okay. So, Dinesh, this is part of the reason I want to do this, because just like with Ann Coulter last year, I really want to know if you're on the level or not.
All right.
That's what I'm curious about. Because do you not know about the 1964 Civil Rights Act? Do you not know that the Democratic Party, led by Lyndon Johnson at the time, risked losing the South for decades, which they did, to pass the Civil Rights Act and the Voting Rights Act, and that Nixon proudly took on the Southern strategy, which was now admitted by two different chairs of the RNC to be a racist strategy to get racist whites, and that's why now the Democratic Party, which used to be conservative, and the Republican Party used to be liberal under Abraham Lincoln, have flipped, and the Democratic Party is liberal, and the Republicans are conservative. So, hold on, and I'm not anywhere near done. So you say FDR and Mussolini said some nice things about each other like decades earlier. I don't know if you know this, they later went to war against one another. So
and after
you have
the
a
war,
history of telling only half the story in a preposterous, comical way.
Okay. All right. I think we're getting to the heart of the issue here, so if you don't mind, let's engage a little bit about it, okay?
Oh, I love it, yeah. Let's
All right.
Let me just add one thing where I think you both agree on, which is the Republican Party used to be the progressive party in America. I don't think that's a secret. I mean, that's...
Well, the Republican Party The Republican Party was the champion of emancipation, anti-segregation, anti-lynching laws, and so on.
Right,
I want to talk about the Civil
So
Rights
you
Act.
liked them when they were progressive?
No, I wouldn't say that's progressive because, no.
I'm pretty sure that's progressive.
No. The progressives of the time were into social engineering, eugenics, forced sterilization. So this is a disguise. The progressives later
And freeing
claimed
the
the mantle.
slaves.
All right.
And freeing the slaves, just as an FYI.
The progressives freed the slaves.
Progressives wanted to free the slaves. They were in the Republican Party. Yes.
No, they were not. The term progressive was invented in the 20th century.
Conservatives liked the way things are. They wanted to keep their tradition and
So
culture
was
of
Abraham Lincoln a
slavery.
Republican?
He was a Republican and a progressive. I know it's hard for
Okay.
you to understand.
Yeah.
The parties switched. That's
Okay,
what he's asking you.
that's-
No one else in the country disputes that other than you.
No, I do dispute it. Let me ask you this question. You mentioned the Civil Rights Act of 1964. Did more Republicans in proportion or more Democrats vote for the Civil Rights Act of 1964? Answer yes, which one? Which party voted in greater proportion for the Civil Rights Act of
Dinesh.
1964?
Great, let's do it.
Which one?
All right.
Do you know?
So I believe that
believe
the
you
guy
know.
who pushed for the Civil Rights Act was a guy named Lyndon Baines Johnson, who was most clearly a Democrat. And at that point, the Democratic Party had a lot of racist conservatives in it. It's true. What led to the transition was the 1964 Civil Rights Act, where those Democratic racists decided, man, I love the Republican Party. I think I should go there. And for
Really?
you to say at that moment in history, that's the whole point, Dinesh.
Okay.
That's when they switched.
All right,
That's
so-
when all the racists went to your party.
Okay. Yeah. So I take it that this is a backhanded admission that far more Republicans proportionally voted for the Civil Rights Act than Democrats, right? Okay, you admit it. You try to camouflage it, but you admit it. Now, you say that that's when they switched. So let me ask you this. We had the Voting Rights Act in 1965 and the Fair Housing Bill in 1968. Let's take the Fair Housing Bill. Did more Republicans or more Democrats proportionally vote for the Fair Housing Bill? Which one?
So, Dinesh, let me try to, again, let's try this one more time. So, Republicans were more progressive. They were the progressive party, so they would push for things that were progressive until those events in that exact time period, Dinesh. And then a lot of them thought, under Nixon, and he wasn't president yet, and when he ran, he said, hey, I got a great idea. Let's get all those racist Democrats to join the Republican Party. Let's run on racism.
Let me
you
ask you
think
this-
the Democrats
okay.
are more racist now? By the way,
No,
let me
hold on.
let me give you one piece of context. I got to give you context.
I just want to
Dinesh,
show-
you wrote a book saying that slavery wasn't about race in this country. You wrote a book where you said black people should give white people reparations for
didn't say that.
liberating them.
No, I did say that slavery in America did not start out in racial terms. The people tried to enslave the American Indians, lots of blacks owned slaves. So this is part of the real complexity of our history. But I noticed that when we're talking,
Yeah.
you raised...
Racism was a real mixed bag. I remember all those white folks being owned by black people. See, that's exactly what I'm going to.
The black slave owners owned black
deceit
slaves.
on purpose, Dinesh. You do it on purpose. You say, oh, for a while we tried to enslave the Native Americans, so we'll say that slavery wasn't about racism. Do you see how that you're obviously misdirecting people, and you're doing it on purpose? It's not like white people were slaves. The overwhelming majority of slavery was black people enslaved. Why can't you admit the most obvious things? Because you have a political agenda.
No, it's
and
because...
what you want to do is support Republicans and
that's
their
not the
current
reason.
day racism.
No. I notice that every time I try to pin you down, you try to switch the topic or reframe the vocabulary. Okay? Now, hold on. You...
Said the guy who earlier in the debate said, now let's pivot.
You mentioned Nixon, right? Nixon's Southern strategy based on open appeals to racism. Let me ask you this. In 1968, who won the Deep South?
So, look, I get it.
You don't
man.
know.
No, I get it. No. His
Oh,
whole
do you know?
His whole shtick is during the transition when we were trying to get the races, we didn't have them all.
Transition. You said it started in '64, and you said Nixon was the epitome of it. Nixon was elected in '68, and I'm asking you who won the Deep South, and you have no idea.
The Democrats owned the Deep South
They
for
owned the Deep
decades
South.
and decades.
Okay.
They lost the South. They lost the South because Nixon began that campaign of the Southern strategy, and Pat Buchanan on MSNBC admitted to me, yes, we ran it for 40 years, and we had a good ride. So, like, for you to take the point where they started and go, they weren't completely and utterly racist yet because their mission had not yet been accomplished, is not a winning argument.
So I'm a little confused. I just need to ask something. So you're basically arguing that a lot of Republicans, as well as some Democrats, supported the Civil Rights Act and then the Voting Rights Act. So was that a good thing or a bad thing for them to do? Like, do you
No, I'm
endorse the
saying
Civil
it's
Rights
a
Act?
very good thing. What I'm getting at is this. Progressive historiography has claimed for the left and for the Democratic Party credit for a civil rights movement in the 60s that was actually done largely by the Republican Party. If the Democratic Party had been the only party in America, none of these laws would have passed. Now, you don't find that in your textbooks. You don't find your professors telling you this. You won't hear about this on the Young Turks. Why? Because they're now doing cover-up for the progressives.
It is purposely misleading. That's why you don't say it, because it's purposely misleading. Is the grass green? Oh, sometimes it's yellow. Gotcha. All right, so do you think that black people should give white people reparations?
No.
Okay, how about that? What you wrote in your book about, hey, they should be so happy about being liberated, they should give white people money.
That's
You
not
wrote
what
that.
I said. That's not what I said. Let me tell you what I did say. And this is why, actually, you know, we're having a debate with politics and entertainment, but we can't get to these issues if we don't frame the other person's argument fairly. In my movies, in the America film, I brought on leading leftists, Michael Eric Dyson and others, and I let them make their case. And later, after the movie, I saw him. I go, Michael, did I portray you fairly in the movie? And he goes, you're not Michael Moore. Yes, you did. Yes, you did. So I'm trying to frame the argument of the left the way they would put it. But you're not doing that. You're basically picking a line here. You don't even have a quote. But you're just throwing it out there, relying on your guys to go wild. And that's not really a debate.
Dinesh, if I did that behind your back, you might have a point. You're right here. You have a mic. I asked you a question.
Well,
answer it.
I'll answer it. So my argument was, and this is an argument that was basically made by not just by Booker T. Washington, many others. They basically argued that slavery was a transmission belt. Slavery was evil, and it was terrible for the slaves. But they asked, what about the descendants of slaves who were subsequently born in America as opposed to being born, let's say, in Africa? Muhammad Ali, when he came back from the rumble in the jungle in Zaire, was asked by a reporter, hey, champ, what did you think of Africa? And he goes, thank God my granddaddy got on that boat. Now, this is Ali being very politically incorrect, but I think making a point that is worth considering. And that is to say that there is great value. We immigrants go through great difficulties to come into the orbit of Western freedom. So this is the complexity of the point I was making, that the slaves in America were worse off, but their descendants born in the orbit of American freedom in a land of opportunity are in fact better off.
So there's another point I want to get to here, which is, Dinesh, you have a movie that you put out, I think, in 20...
I'm glad you put that in context, by the way. I'm sure the slaves were so thankful. You made a cogent point there.
I said that
congratulations, you've been put in the orbit of freedom, ironically, through slavery. Hundreds of years of slavery. That is a curious orbit of freedom.
Cenk.
Don't worry, though. Your great-grandkids one day might be free after I whip you, I own you, I kill you, I separate your family, I rape your wife. After all that, your great-grandkids might be in the orbit of freedom. Why, thank you so much.
So I just finished saying that slavery was a terrible moral crime, and we have to distinguish the slaves from their descendants. That's what I did say. You weren't listening because you've trained your ear to jump before you think.
Hey, you guys want to do a poll of African Americans in this country and ask them if they should thank white people for slavery? How do you think that poll comes out, Dinesh?
I don't think anyone has ever said that.
Okay, but no, today they are the descendants who have been brought into the orbit of freedom. So according to your logic, they should be incredibly thankful. Let's do a poll. Let's find out.
Hold on a
do
second.
you really believe these things, Dinesh?
Cenk.
Or are you trying to get paid by right-wing guys who are paying you to say this nonsense?
Cenk, there are penniless Irish driven out by the potato famine who came starving to America. Their lives were actually, in many senses, worse. But their descendants, born here now in America, obviously enjoy freedoms that their ancestors didn't have. So I don't understand why you are, I don't know if you're being vile or being stupid, but it looks to me like it's some bizarre combination of the two. You refuse to try to understand what I'm saying.
No, I think I got it.
You got it.
Yes.
I think you got it. At least to the degree you can.
Let me ask you about another book you wrote where you said that 9/11 was because of Planned Parenthood, Nancy Pelosi, and Brokeback Mountain.
Really? Really? That's what I said.
Yes,
Maybe
and that
you
it
can
was.
clarify.
Go ahead, clarify. That's what you have a mic for.
Sure.
Go for it, big guy.
Yeah.
How about it, Hoss?
So in my book, The Enemy at Home, I raised the question of, when you look at the propaganda of the radical Muslims, what are the themes that they emphasize to recruit on the Arab street? And I said, you see foreign policy in there, you see Palestine, you see Saudi Arabia, but many of these guys aren't in Palestine or Saudi Arabia. They're in Pakistan, they're in Egypt. So what attracts them to the radical Muslim cause? I said, this whole notion of America as the great Satan is an attempt to capitalize on the values of Hollywood that are projected abroad. Now, here we have to realize we're not just talking about radical Muslims. Throughout Asia today, there's a slogan that's gathering currency. It's called modernization, yes, westernization, no. And this is traditional people all over the world who want Western technology, and they want constitutional rights, and they want democracy, but they don't like what they see as some of the more shameless aspects of Western culture shoved down their throats. This is a real issue worldwide. Look at the recent case in Orlando. If anyone thinks that there's no merit to this, just read the book. He doesn't read books. What he does, he makes these one-sentence summaries.
I don't read his books. There's a big difference.
That's right. You don't read them, but you talk about them. You don't read them, but you talk about them because someone gave you the one-sentence summary.
All right. Have you watched every one of my shows?
No.
How dare you? Don't talk about anything I say.
All right, let's move on
I haven't talked about your shows.
All right, by the way, you just said, yeah, liberals caused 9/11. That's your argument, right?
I said that not the real American, not actual American culture, but the projection of American culture abroad is giving aid and comfort to the radical Muslims who are using it as an effective recruiting tool. I did say that.
So when you mentioned Brokeback Mountain, that was just a coincidence that movie happened to be about homosexuality?
No, I'm actually saying that the trumpeting of values like homosexuality, feminism, in third world cultures becomes a way of people saying, we don't want that. We don't want that over here. You join me to fight against the great Satan.